Welcome to Election Watch. I'm Rohit Kumar.
And I'm Janice Mays. The Democratic National Convention is underway, and while we're focused on policy, there's a lot more to dissect.
But be warned, this is not your middle school dissection project. And as a bonus, we're joined by former JCT economist Carl Russo for insight and guidance. Carl, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we dive in, a note. We are filming this episode at 10 a.m. Eastern on Thursday, August 22nd. Based on history, developments will happen during and after the filming. So if you don't hear about it now, we're likely to cover it later. Okay, with disclaimer done, let's get to it. Janice, last week, Vice President Harris unveiled a string of economic proposals focused on inflation. On Monday, she rolled out additional policy proposals, including increasing the corporate rate to 28%. Kind of what are your initial takeaways from what she said?
My first takeaway is she'll continue to do these one-off proposals. They're more noteworthy that way, so it doesn't all get buried together in one thing. The 28% rate was kind of her first confirmation of those Biden Green Book proposals from his latest budget that he issued. And I think she will continue to endorse a number of those. Some she's just going to be silent on. And the convention adopted as its tax platform those proposals. So if I were a business doing scenario planning, I'd still use those as what the administration will dream about getting. May not get that much if Democrats ran the table. The other two things she proposed, and I think she'll do more of these, is expanding on something that helps taxpayers, the child tax credit, and helping people afford housing.
Carl, can you help us sort of better understand her economic proposals, and how are they similar or different from what former President Trump has proposed?
Yeah, so as you said, there are a number of places in which there are similar policy proposals that she's outlined. So for example, extending the 2017 tax cuts for those making less than $400,000. You saw J.D. Vance come out with a proposal to increase the child credit. She also repeated that and upped that. The exclusion of taxation on tip income was another one of those repeat proposals. And then there was one of her housing proposals to make federal land available for the construction of affordable housing that was also similar to something that Trump has talked about in the past. But that's really where the similarities end. One of the things that Harris did was to really respond to some of the pressures on inflation by outlining a proposal to limit price gouging, in her words, on the part of grocery stores in particular, to set prices under review of the Federal Trade Commission. And so those are proposals that I think highlight some of the more divergent policies that would be pursued under a Harris administration.
Yeah, although that price gouging proposal, that's gotten some pushback, even from some of her maybe more natural political allies.
That's right. Jason Furman, who is a prominent economist in the Obama administration, sort of criticized the proposal as saying it's not really sensible policy that leaves sort of things for economists like myself to dislike in both party platforms, tariffs on the Trump side and sort of these price controls on the Democratic side.
Well, as you well know, we do not let economists run the government. It would be an entirely different machine.
Indeed.
Let's switch gears for a moment, and I want both of you to answer this. It's been about a month since President Biden stepped away from this campaign and endorsed his Vice President, Kamala Harris. Let's discuss the latest polling numbers and the Electoral College map, which is going to be on the screen for our viewers. How has that changed over these last 4 weeks?
So 4 weeks ago, the idea that Democrats would contend in some of the Sun Belt states like Arizona, or even not Sun Belt necessarily, but like Georgia or North Carolina, that was kind of off the table, or maybe off the map. But those are definitely back in play, in addition to the blue wall states, like the sort of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan component, giving Harris perhaps multiple paths to 270 electoral votes, whereas even under the best of scenarios for President Biden, the path to 270 seemed to run only through the upper Midwest, and there wasn't really a plausible, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia were like not really even in question. So there's definitely been some expansion. But Carl, I think you noticed this too. I was surprised. I saw some polling in Virginia that surprised me, given that if North Carolina and Georgia are kind of contested, you would think Virginia would be in the bank for Harris, but it's not.
Yeah, that's right. There was a recent poll out that showed Trump within 3 points in Virginia, again, if you think that some of these other states are moving in the direction that they are, maybe that's a little bit of a surprise. Now, it's possible that that's an outlier poll. I commend polling agencies that put out those kinds of results so that we get all of that information into the marketplace. But it's possible that there's sort of a shifting in some other directions, maybe in some other places that we hadn't really considered. I will say one state that sort of moved off the table, maybe that was in consideration before, is Minnesota, with the selection of Governor Walz as the running mate there. That probably is a bridge too far for the Trump campaign.
Yeah, Janice, anything you noticed?
I just think we're going to have to wait until after this convention is over. It's been a quick turnaround. People are still catching their breath here, and see how this longer term does her increase in popularity. Does it keep going up? Does it level off now that people are settled in on who the candidates are and who they're approaching, and those enthusiasm levels in the states that are in play here? Be interesting to watch as that evolves. I think it's still a little early, but she certainly has made Democrats more optimistic that they have a path forward that they didn't think they had before.
Yeah.
Rhode, is there anything else that catches your attention about the week we've just had?
Yeah, so one thing in particular, as a child of the Senate, anytime some discussion of the Senate or changing the Senate rules gets mentioned, it catches my attention. So Senator Schumer at the convention and in some
as he danced onto the stage,
yes, has become increasingly bullish about Democrats keeping the Senate. Now, I'm not sure that the polling necessarily supports that result. What you're seeing in Montana in particular is the Republican challengers starting to consistently poll 3, 4, 5 points ahead of Senator Tester, who's the incumbent. But if Democrats ran the table and kept the Senate, took the House, kept the White House with Vice President Harris as president instead, Schumer has said he would revisit the question of changing the filibuster rules in the Senate and getting rid of the legislative filibuster. Now, he's marketing it as, for isolated issues, like whether it's reproductive rights or voting rights or things like that. But we all know, or we should all appreciate, if you change it for one thing, you've changed it for everything. It's just a matter of time.
With the courts.
That's right. We saw that with the courts and judicial nominations and nominations now generally. And that would matter both for the degree of swing in policy, but we spent a lot of time in the tax world thinking about what could fit in budget reconciliation, what can't be done in reconciliation. Reconciliation would be an irrelevancy in a world where there was no legislative filibuster, because you do everything with a simple majority vote. You would never abide by the reconciliation rules. You wouldn't have to, right? And so there wouldn't be expiring tax cuts at the end of 2025 because there'd be no reconciliation rule that would have driven it. So it would be an entirely different environment. I'm not sure that it's likely to happen, and there may be more resistance amongst sort of incumbent Senate Democrats than has otherwise been publicly expressed. But last time it was Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema. They're both retiring. But that caught my attention, and that is something that I'm continuing to keep one eye on, because there is this sort of steady drumbeat of maybe we should change the rules of the Senate in a way that would facilitate significantly larger policy swings based on who controls the chamber.
I do think that's the downside of it. There's no compromise needed if you have run the tables and won.
That's right.
And I think that gets also to the durability of policy. One of the things that we've said for the business community that's really important is stability, and you get more of that when it's done in a bipartisan way.
All right. Thanks, Carl. Thank you, Janice, for joining us always. And thank you for watching. Stay with Policy on Demand for more on election developments. Take care.